So what are you doing?
Nothing.
Actually roll.
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.
It's easy feelings long to keep. They get by a minute into force. Oh, I didn't notice it's all getting full. But only when got him back, chest, and got here. I didn't think it'd ever come to a stop.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cannabis and Coffee with me, Tamrijuana. It's a great day in these Kootenays, but we've been praying for rain. It's been, a long winter, and then it's kind of dried out, and we've got some flooding, but not in my direct area, thankfully. But the Okanagan, we want to reach out to our friends out in Kelowna. Guys, stay dry, guys, because we see that it's coming down pretty good out there. So it is going to rain a little bit here today, but I'm glad about that. My gardens need some water. It's, like I said, we had a lot of snow, and then it's kind of rolled into spring-ish, summer-ish, and we've had some really warm weather. We finished up the global marijuana marches across the country on Saturday. We went out in Cranbrook, BC. We had 6 moms out there standing in front of City Hall. We had some pretty good response, as well as our MP, Wayne Stetsky, which was kind of epic. We had a Shop Till You Drop is what it was called, downtown Cranbrook. So there was a lot of people milling around the downtown core, and he was walking past, across the street, and I seen him, and I looked, and I said, "Hey, Mr. Stetsky." So he came over and he had a conversation with us, and he's an NDP, not liberal up here. So of course their stance on cannabis reform is decriminalization of all small amounts of drugs as well. Being in the opposition, of course, that doesn't really help us with the Liberals with their new Prohibition 2.0 plan. So we stated to him, first and foremost, 45 new laws. This is not legalization. And that was the message that we were getting out on Saturday, is that there's 45 new laws attached to Bill C-45. I've said in the past that I was pretty pleased about most of the things that are going on with this bill. But when you see the 45 new laws that are attached to it, sorry, people, that's not legalization. Now, we're going to talk about some legalization issues as well that's going on in California state, because they have also been struggling and battling for the last 20 years to try and end prohibition down there. This morning, I'd like to welcome Patrick Moore, who has been instrumental in working in the California legislations. And he's also worked with Jack Hara and been spoken with Ron Paul. So good morning, Patrick. How are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm doing fantastic. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's good to have you. So we're going to ask you, what I usually ask most of my guests, who are you and why did you get involved in cannabis reform?
Oh, my goodness. Yes. No, my name is Patrick Moore. I've been in the cannabis reform movement since 1990. I met Jack Hare in 1990, and I was just out in the world, straight out of high school, trying to find ways to make the world a better place. And I ran across this gentleman who said, "Weed could save the planet." And on the back of his book was a $10,000 challenge that if anything in his book was found to be untrue, he would give you $10,000. And then the premise of the book was cannabis could replace petroleum, nuclear, and all of the resources we're using today 100%. So I thought, well, that's an interesting challenge. And if the worst comes to worst, I'll get $10,000. And if not, I'll find an interesting tool here to work with. And he quickly won me over with the book, a brilliant, brilliant historical overview of cannabis. And then I set out to pass the CCHI, the California Cannabis Hemp Initiative. That was Jack Hare's one-pager. That was really, to this day, still the finest piece of legislation I've ever read. And he said we were close. 1992 was going to be our big year. 1994 was going to be our big year. So I jumped in, started collecting signatures in California here. We can write our own laws. If we get enough signatures, we can get them on the ballot and pass them ourselves. So that was the direction we were going. And then 1995 came. In 1994, I helped pass the Health Freedom Act here in California. In the United States, or actually in the United States, they were trying to ban vitamins and minerals. As if cannabis wasn't enough, they were going to add everything else to that list. So we passed what is really in America one of the most important pieces of legislation and one of the most forgotten pieces, the Health Freedom Act. So that really got my blood boiling. That's where I saw victory. That's when I knew that the people could rise up and do things. And then the next year, the decision was made not to run the Jack Herer Initiative, the only time in the last 30 years, because we decided to work with Dennis Perone and help pass Proposition 215, the medical marijuana bill. We were told here in California that if we jumped on board with them, in the next 2 years, everyone else would jump back on board with us and slam dunk the CCHI, maybe 4 years. So we got on the streets, we collected signatures, we passed the Proposition 215. Nobody knew what to do with it. We forget, in the mid-'90s, medical marijuana wasn't even vernacular. People didn't even put those two words together. I remember catching the signatures, and people look at me and be like, well, you had me at marijuana, but what do you mean medical? I'd be like, just sign. Don't worry. We'll work it out, right?
Right.
So we got the door open, and then the next 10 years, the cannabis community more or less ignored us as I set up medical and figured out what to do with it. Then for the last 10 years, we really saw the movers and shakers in California fight against us because the direction of legalization started going another way. George Soros and a lot of organizations started pushing towards a much more restrictive, much more complicated form of legalization. And this idea of a libertarianish kind of like a Prop 215, but for medical and for recreational, or for recreational and industrial, just didn't seem to fit everyone's model so well. And that shocked me to some degree. I was always a little surprised by the pullback from the community, but a core of us kept going, never stopped, and we get so close so many times. That was what was frustrating, is California is such a big state. We would collect more signatures than Alaska, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and Arizona put together, and still not get halfway there, or still only get 60 or 70% of the signatures we needed. And it would get close enough to where the next year we would jump right back in. We'd literally take a month break, 2 month break, because it's a 2 year process. So I'd get a month or two break every 2 years, do something else for a minute, and then jump back in, start building that momentum to get those signatures. And I did that for 30 years until Prop 64 passed. Half of our battle for the last 10 years was trying to get our bill passed, and then right when we'd run out of time, there'd be some other billionaire with a bad bill trying to shove it down our throats here in California. So we stopped Prop 19. It actually got on the ballot here in 2010. And then Prop 64 slipped right by us with the work of the Democratic Party and Gavin Newsom and Sean Parker and Snoop Dogg, and everybody got involved in that one and just overwhelmed our little force here. So we were sad to see that happen. It's truly the worst bill probably in the world today for cannabis, and it's devastating the California cannabis community. It hasn't even really begun yet, and it's already taking its toll.
Can we step back a minute and maybe explain exactly what is it entailed in that bill? Because up here, some of us might not know what they're trying to do, whether they're trying to roll stuff back. So can you explain what's in that bill that you find what is like what's going on now comparably to what's going to happen?
Right. Now we had not even a full page. Prop 215 was a one-page bill, and it offered patients access to medicine in a very simple form. And the more it went through court and the more it got challenged, the more the judges had to lean on our side. It'd always go, if not at the original court, in the appellate court, always lean towards the side of the patients. And so by the end of 20 years, we could have as much as we want. We could make concentrates out of it. We could smoke anywhere we wanted. We could, nobody quite knew where the line was with the patient here in California. So we had an immense amount of freedom once you're into that system. And all you had to go do is see a doctor, and you were in that system. So it was about as good as any bill had ever been passed. And I believe Prop 64 at the other end of that spectrum has to be some type of revenge. It has to be some way of getting us back for embarrassing them in front of the world and showing what, a liberal cannabis use could be about. So Sean Parker and Gavin Newsom and a guy named Dr. Donald Lyman, there's the key to the whole thing. And that's when I knew we were in for a big fight. The LA Times did one article with Dr. Donald Lyman at the very beginning of the Prop 64 process. And they interviewed him. And about halfway through, even the guy from the LA Times was like, well, you seem an awful strange gentleman to be trying to legalize cannabis. And he said, yeah, I know. I see this as a way of keeping more control, getting this problem solved. He considers cannabis to be a problem, than prohibition. We will get more of them this way through this legalization than through prohibition. And then they never interviewed him again. He disappeared, and it became Snoop Dogg and Sean Parker and all these other faces, all the leaders of ASA and NORML and MPP and the DPA, all those they could buy on board to push this bill. Because the original man, the man who was a proponent of it, the man whose name was at the top of the bill, Dr. Donald Lyman, couldn't even hide the fact that he was so rabidly anti-cannabis. He pulled out stuff that was like reefer madness. Crazy stuff we haven't heard since the 30s. He really believes, he honestly believes cannabis to be the most addictive, dangerous addictive drug in America.
That's happening here too.
Yeah,
that's happening here. That's happening. Like go ahead, but yeah,
it's a global movement. There's a global movement. No, they're really trying to redefine cannabis as a
like I said, as we
drug.
as we go forward into legalization here in Canada, we're seeing more and more reefer madness coming out. Harms that go along with it. The Ontario government came out with pros and cons to cannabis. They're locking down and regulating everything so tightly that, like I said, there's 45 new laws attached to this bill. So from the aspect where you're coming from, where you've had lots of freedom being medical, even up here, we've had a medical program since 2000, right? And we've had pretty much the same freedoms, like we could smoke wherever you could smoke cigarettes. We could, grow our own cannabis. We could do, bake because of the Smith ruling a couple years ago. We could use cannabis in all forms, which meant extractions, baking. And then we just had one of the biggest busts in Canada for one of the edible products in our industry because it's, of course, still not regulated and illegal. So they just shut down one of the largest edible companies in our country, like last week, and they've kept it quiet. It's just starting to filter its way out now. So I'm understanding exactly what you're battling against, because we're doing the same thing up here. Maybe not because California is a state, and we're doing this federally, right? So it's a huge undertaking, and then they're kicking it back to the province, so back to the state, right? Like where you're at. So difference between California and Denver, quite a bit. Then I would assume.
Yes, no, unfortunately, everybody got a better bill than us. I know Washington and Colorado and other states are having their issues, but none of them as complicated or as severe as California is facing right now. And they're easing it in. It's first year of Prop 64 here in California. So they even said at the beginning of the year, yeah, we know there's a lot of stuff in here. Don't worry. This year, we're not going to enforce everything. So we'll have 1 year where they'll kind of phase out a lot of what was in 215 and a lot of what we got used to, and they'll kind of ease in their 64. I think, of course, there won't be such a shock. There won't be big headlines at the early part of the year. So, yeah, my prediction, it makes me sad as I think about it, because I said in many interviews in the last year and a half, I believe we'll see more people go to jail in California in the next 5 years than in the last 20 years put together for cannabis. And that's based on my understanding of prohibition. People have been telling me my whole life, don't worry about this cannabis thing. We won alcohol prohibition. We'll win cannabis just like that. So I looked at how we won alcohol prohibition in America, and that's exactly what happened. More people went to jail in the 5 years after than the 20 years of alcohol prohibition. And nobody talks about that. Most people don't know about that, but that's the direction. That's our legacy with prohibition. So we're looking at the same kind of crackdown under the guise of legal. We're looking at a hyper war on cannabis, a hyper war on our community, and our community here in California is simply not ready for it. I mean, there's certainly the creme of the creme. There's certainly the people who really, really pay attention, who understand how bad this bill is, but it's a small minority. Most people are still celebrating on some level and recognize that there are a couple problems. That's what they kept saying. Yeah, it's not perfect, but we'll work it out. Yeah, that's not the direction this is going to go without some radical action.
That's exactly what's happening here. That's what's happening here, because like I said previously, I said, well, 10 years ago we didn't have this. At least, and to the general population, they're going to think carrying 30 grams of cannabis is good. They're not going to get busted for a joint. They'll be able to grow 4 plants. But here's the thing, even with the 4 plants, you can't have them visible if you're within certain amounts of school. So the regulation on the plant growing, are you going to be able to have them in your rental property? Can you grow them outside in your backyard? Like there's so many different little, tweakings that have to be done. Same with the edible products and the extractions. So as you dig through this bill C-45, and then there's other bills like with the legislation on the the driving, which is another one that we're appalled by. But here's the thing, like I said, our message was 45 new laws. That's not legalization in Canada.
Right.
If you're caught in public high, okay, I don't know how they're going to actually be able to to even figure out how you're high in public. I mean, you're not going to be staggering around like you do when you're impaired with alcohol. I'm not sure how they're going to be able to regulate this. But if you're caught high in Canada, you will be subjected to a 3-month jail sentence and a $5,000 fine. If you're caught drunk in public, you might get a $150 fine a night in the drunk tank. So to me, that's archaic. Like, and how are the police going to be able to tell whether you're high in public? When you're high on cannabis, it's not like acid, not like mushrooms. You're not rolling around on the ground, seeing purple flashing and the sky's not turning colors. I'm sorry. I'm not quite sure how they plan on doing this, but that's just one that stands out to me. The same with, the children thing. Under the age of whatever it is, 19, I think in British Columbia, they can carry up to 5 grams. But if they're caught trafficking, so if a 19-year-old is to give an 18-year-old a joint and they're caught, that 19-year-old is going to go to jail for minimum 5, I think it's minimum of 6 months to 5 years. So they've upped the 9 laws that we had prior to 45 laws. They're pumping billions of dollars into police, and police forces to police us, and they're going to tax us to pay them. Like, if that's not the biggest hypocrisy that's out there, right? So how does that kind of like the way it is down there too? Is it kind of like they've pushed a bunch more state funding into the police, or?
Oh my gosh, no, they took the taxes, and 50% of the taxes for UMA, they call it, the Adult Use Marijuana Act, 50% of the taxes go into this new police force called the Canna Police. No, it's not called the Canna Police. They call them the enforcers, or the regulators, in capital letters in the bill. So half of the taxes in California, they say it could be several $1 billion a year, half of the taxes. So there's going to be a new police force funded to the tune of billions of dollars a year, literally, going after just cannabis use. Something California's never seen before. The DEA, every cop in the state working on their little drug programs, it doesn't equal what's about to happen in California. And all of that, our money, our cannabis tax money. The other 10% of that, what's left, the other 50%, 10% of that goes into rehabs. And I heard so many people talk about how proud they were that, the cannabis community was going to help, solve all the drug addiction problems here in California, all the methamphetamine addicts, all the coke addicts, all the people on heroin. No.
Cannabis substitution.
No. Those drug rehabs are for us.
I know.
Back to Dr.
That's what
Donald
I'm saying.
Lyman.
They should, and what we're finding here, like Neil Magnuson's out in downtown Vancouver twice a week handing out cannabis to opioid addicts in downtown East Hastings in Vancouver. So what they should be doing is doing cannabis substitution and research rather than policing us and putting us into recovery. Like, I don't know how many people do you actually know that are addicted to cannabis?
Oh yeah, nobody. No, you don't get addicted to cannabis. But by Dr. Donald Lyman's point of view, he passed. He worked on this for decades. Him and his academic crew, a bunch of guys up at Berkeley and some folks at UCLA, and they've got cannabis use disorder, CUD. Cannabis use disorder has been submitted into and accepted by the American Psychiatric Association as an official diagnostic. So there's a book the psychiatrists put out every 2 years. The official diagnostic book of psychiatry, and all it is a list of diagnoses and then a column of all the drugs you're allowed to give that person. But it's the key. It's 90% of psychiatry nowadays. It's just that list of just things you can say to somebody and can call them, labels you can give them, and they got cannabis use disorder added to that list. So it's an official. You can actually end up in a psychiatry situation. And if you admit to being a daily user of cannabis and, 20 or 30 other things that almost everybody I know does, then they can diagnose you as being an addict and lock you into a psychiatric facility and start giving you drugs.
You're kidding me.
The drug, no. So the drug rehabs in California are set up for us. And nobody, again, people are not willing to even look at that yet until they're there, until they're stuck in some rehab. Because right now in California, there are more people in rehabs for cannabis than heroin or cocaine.
Oh my God.
Because
Oh my God.
people, because like any drug law, you get busted and they give you the option, instead of going to jail for a couple
absolutely.
months or whatever, you can go to rehab. So
They do
we
that
are
here,
filling
too.
up more spaces in rehabs just to avoid going to the jail than all these poor meth heads out here who say they don't have rehabs to
Right.
go to because they're
That's
full of a
right.
bunch of pot addicts trying not to go to jail.
Right.
So they're going
They
to
do that
fix
here,
that
too.
within a couple, $200-300 million a year into new drug rehabs. So there'll be space for all of us. This
my
is
God.
the direction we're going. This is what Prop 64 and Gavin Newsom, the lieutenant governor here, they call him the new Kennedy. They think he's going to be the next president. He's going to be a savior of the Democratic Party, which is really falling apart here in America. They've got their eyes pegged on this young, charismatic California senator who's going to make all the difference. They think he's going to be president somewhere along the way here soon. So he kept saying he wants to live in a state where his daughter will never have to smell cannabis. Never in her life.
God.
She's like 12 years old or something, but he wants her to be able to go through the next 50 years in California and never have to smell it, as if it was some sort of horrible offense he'd had to live with through his life. He said this on the campaign trail for 64. He said this to people who were trying to get the vote for this thing. And again, a lot of the cannabis community wasn't paying close enough attention. They'd see the memes, they'd see the commercials, they'd see the little 1-minute clips with Snoop Dogg and all these people, and they'd think, oh, well, it's got to be pretty good. But, you know, I was listening closely, and I kept hearing things like that. Like, what do you mean in the next 50 years you can get through living in California and never have to smell cannabis? And I started digging deeper and deeper, and it literally died. You know, we had to bring in an attorney. I'd read hundreds of ballot initiatives, and I couldn't get through 64. I was on page 10 or 12 of 64, and it was literally 65 pages. And I was stumped. I mean, it was truly, truly confusing. And then we got, again, one of the top attorneys here in California, Letitia Pepper, to go through it. And she says she spent 4 days with it nonstop. And at the end, she was just aghast. She was just horrified. Never seen a bill like that before. So she did a very, very detailed analysis for us of what it really meant. Every 2 or 3 paragraphs, she'd have to fill in another paragraph of her own saying, well, here's what that means. And then people started getting, then we started really seeing the depth of the depravity of this bill. So, we started blasting that out everywhere. We hooked a little QR code to it and started putting a little QR code on hundreds of thousands of pieces of literature and flyers and little things we put out, trying to get people to just look at the bill. And again, it was such a big, complicated bill. Most people just, as they do, just read the headline, read the summary, listened to what the famous people had to say, trusted their industry leaders, all these, again, ASA, NORML, and MPP, and all those groups, trusted them to, steer them towards the vote. And, and in the years to come, people will go back and actually start reading this bill and understanding how bad we have it, how much we gave up. And it's a shame because as national legalization is looking more and more likely here in California or in the United States, probably fairly soon, no matter what happens, we're stuck with 64 here in California. There could be literally in the next year or two, dozens of states with more progressive laws than us, and all those states put together, not as big of an industry as us. So as long as they can seize the crown jewel, which really California is the crown jewel of the planet for cannabis, as long as they can seize that, yeah, maybe New Mexico, maybe Texas, maybe a few of these other states slip by with things that are, somewhat forward-thinking and somewhat fair, but California won't. And again, it just breaks my heart because so much of the community, so much of the progress within this movement's been here, and yet we're the ones that have been slapped the hardest and are likely going to be hurt the worst by this wave of legalization. And at the root of it, I find, surprise, surprise, George Soros. George Soros, the man who funds thousands of nonprofits around the world, and each and every state, he's got many, many working in unison on both sides of the issue. So he'll fund groups that are anti-cannabis, he'll fund groups that are pro-cannabis, and then he'll create coalitions to come and harass and intimidate, media and politicians and people like that. So, I've found at the root this globalist theme and he does it all over the world. But you know, his influence here in California in the last couple of years has been profound.
And it's money.
I just like to, and it's money, right? No, absolutely.
It's money.
He's
Who has the biggest? Who has
dollars.
the biggest bank account, right? And that's exactly how it is up here too. Like all the small people that have been involved in this cannabis movement for so many years are just being left out. So, and on that note, we're going to take a quick break. And I'd like to thank my sponsors, who are 12 High Chicks Magazine, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners Society, the Haley Rose Foundation, and the Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana. Harvest Fest is coming up July 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Don't miss out. Get a hold of Debbie at chairmom at, chair at mom.ca. Had to think about that for a minute. Sorry, folks. Our song's going to be The Salads, Weed and Wine. We'll be right back with Pat.
Are you looking for cannabis news, education, and people's opinions? Are you looking to learn what Canadian and international cannabis advocates are doing, not only now, but what got them to this point in their lives, and what does the future hold for them? Do you want to learn how patients are using cannabis as a daily medication, or learn how their cannabis use helps them with their medical condition? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then I'm going to suggest to you to tune in to Lifestyle Radio. Catch their live weekly shows and have your questions and concerns answered and find the experience you're looking for. Monday, catch your weekly news broadcast with the Reef Reporters. Then on Wednesday, get several hours worth of cannabis public education. We get things started with Cannabis and Coffee with Tamrijuana. Then tune in and catch Pottawa with Russell Barth, who calls himself the world's angriest pothead. Finish up your evening with the award-winning Pace Radio Show with Al Graham and joint host Kim Cooper and Alicia Yashishin. No week would be complete without tuning into Friday night's program, the 420 Radio Show, featuring Al Rapp and the 420 Radio crew, Mary Jane Baker and Marcel Gignac. Cannabis is a lifestyle, and you can catch all your cannabis lifestyle information right here at lifestyleradio.net or at our sister site, 420radio.ca.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
Makes
All right. And we're back with Pat from California. We were talking a lot about what's going on in California and how their laws are coming into effective change and how it kind of almost parallel to what ours are kind of going to be like. So we were talking a little bit over the break about how things are rolling out. So you want to kind of explain, like you said, there's a silver lining to all of this. And we were talking about the fact that in Canada, we have gone to court. Like, it hasn't been the government that said, oh, hey, you guys, we finally realized that, this isn't so bad. We're just going to get rid of it. Like, remove it off the CDSA like we've all wanted to, take it off the Scheduled 1 list, make it what it is. It's a herb. It's a plant. Let us just, do what we want and leave it at that. And that's not what's happened. So, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. No. We are... I had finally, after, again, this 28-year cycle of getting signatures and trying to pass these bills, after 2016, when Prop 64 finally passed, I thought I was kind of done. I used to tell people, hey, if this doesn't pass here in California, it's not going to pass anywhere else. So, again, it was the most liberal, open bill I'd ever read, and it seemed like it was here or nowhere. So I was willing to sort of take a break. I was going to go back into business and try to make a little money finally. I actually have a hemp clothing company. I have a vape pen company. So I was going to put a little, I had paid no attention to for years. So I was going to put a little focus into those. And I ended up meeting Roger Stone. Roger Stone is Trump's right-hand man, an old friend of Trump, one of the men who helped encourage him to run for office. There was a famous film called Get Me Roger Stone, because that's what Trump said 2 years ago. He says, I'll run if you get me Roger Stone to run my campaign. So when he finally won the election, that first week he kept saying, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for this guy. This guy, I owe him the biggest favor in the world. And he said this several times in front of a camera. And again, they're making this film about Roger Stone called Get Me Roger Stone. And that ended up in the film. So and then it ended up being a big blockbuster hit on Netflix here in America for last year. So a good chunk of America has seen this film, knows that the president owes Roger Stone a big favor. And last year on 420, Roger Stone got on the Alex Jones show and said, hey, I'm calling in my favor. I'm going to legalize cannabis. I hate Jeff Sessions. I'm going to put him in a little box, and I'm going to use my influence to steer Trump to do what he said he was going to do 20 years ago, legalize cannabis.
Right.
So I ended up, that tickled me a little bit, looked into Roger Stone a little bit, ended up meeting him shortly thereafter, gave him a copy of Jack Hare's book, walked up to Roger Stone at a Politicon, a big convention they have here in Southern California, and said, Mr. Stone, you're my second favorite historian, and it's an honor to meet you. And he kind of looked at me funny. I was like, oh, yeah, my favorite historian, Jack Hare. Here's his book. You ever read it? And he looked at me and shook his head. I'm like, well, you got to. Here's a copy for you. Then I gave him a copy of the Jack Hare bill, the initiative, and I gave him a nice hemp shirt. He's a big fashion icon guy, and so I gave him one of our hemp shirts from Ecolution, and made an impression. So he got hold of me shortly thereafter, put me on the coalition, and with the help of Tyler Nixon and a few of these people, really helped me steer the coalition. They kept saying I was the most radical voice they'd ever heard in legalization, the person who thought it out more than anybody they'd met. So they've kept me very actively involved in this coalition for the last year, pushing towards a national legalization based on the model of Jack Hare's initiative, which for 30 years,
fabulous.
There's no, it's mind-boggling. For 30 years, there's no one even to talk to in D.C. No president, Bush, Clinton, Obama, none of them even wanted to talk to us. It wasn't even an option to push for something like the Jack Hare initiative. So with everything I'm hearing in America about how horrible Trump is and how horrible this whole thing is, I'm hearing from the insider, no, the Jack Hare initiative has more chance right now. The administration right now would be more open towards these radical libertarian ideas than anybody in the past. So for a year, I worked with Roger Stone, pushing these ideas, trying to distill down the essence of the Jack Hare initiative, limiting licensing fees, limiting taxes, descheduling cannabis from the federal level, that kind of stuff. And nothing happened. We had Jeff Sessions for a year squawking about how horrible cannabis was and all the things he was going to do. And Trump didn't say a word. So in early April, a year into this, I'm starting to feel a little vulnerable out here. I'm the only person I know on the West Coast who's joined the coalition, who's jumped in full force and said, all right, I got your back, Mr. Stone, let's do this. Everyone else is, a lot of them are resistors. A lot of them are trying to still get Trump out of office or trying to pretend he's not in office. So a year into this, I was feeling a little thin. And then Stone told me in early April, said, this month, you're going to see several things happen. There are going to be enough things that are going to happen before 420 where you're going to know our time hasn't been wasted. And sure enough, the Mitch McConnell bill got introduced. Mitch McConnell's a senator here, most powerful senator in D.C., and he introduced a bill to deschedule industrial hemp. Just take it off of the scheduling, make it an agricultural crop, run with it. Not only did he introduce it, he's fast-tracked it. It means they don't shop it around for a month or two and let people change it. He just put it on the House floor to be voted on, and they're going to do that here fairly soon. And then Bonner, who used to be the most powerful senator in D.C., joined some giant investment group and flipped 180 degrees. He used to be very anti-cannabis, and now he's full-on going to be part of this Acreage, one of the largest cannabis investment groups in America. Then a week after that, Donald Trump met with the gardener from Colorado and said, yeah, your medical safe, your recreational safe from Sessions, and I'm going to legalize the next 3 years anyways. Boom! That's what I've been waiting to hear. That's what he hadn't said in a year, and yet that's what we had been saying as a coalition, is that we believe Trump was going to make the right move. So there's a new invigorated energy I have. I'm convinced now that we are going to make a bold step forward sometime in the next 3 years, and that this coalition is going to be, is the key to moving this ball down the field and actually giving us a win. So I'm doubling down with my efforts.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. I'm just going to be the devil's advocate here. Okay. So he goes ahead, and he's a corporate capitalist, and he goes ahead and he allows federal cannabis regulation. And you guys end up with the same shit we've got with all his friends with their fat cat wallets getting rich off the backs of patients and recreational users across the country. So like I said, being the devil's advocate here, because I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but you know what? Trudeau did the same thing. He promised us legalization. He promised he'd support dispensaries. And of course, the MMAR brought Stephen Harper's fat cat friends in already. We now have Bill Blair, who used to be the chief of police for Toronto, as the head of the drug committees. We have MPs and ex-RCMP and all kinds of people sitting on boards of directors of all these licensed producers, and they're making billions of dollars off of us. So I'm being the devil's advocate. I think it's great. I'm saying go ahead. That's terrific. Get it on that Senate floor. Trust me, you guys need to do that too. But I'm giving you that little be careful. Because be careful for what you wish, right? Because that's what I told people.
Trump is no Trudeau.
What you wish for. Well, he's not. That's for sure. But the same message is being said, right? We're going to do this. We're going to do this in 3 years. We're going to get this done. You guys are going to be happy. He stood in Winnipeg after a dispensary, or Saskatoon had been busted, raided, taken all their stuff, and he said, "I will stand up for dispensaries. I will make sure that you'll be able to have them." They are going to be able to have them as long as they're corporately ran. And all the cannabis is going to be coming out of the licensed producer. So all the gardeners that have been producing in the past that are illegal growers have either a choice to go into crafting, which is still a $2 million endeavor. You can go into a licensed production, which is a $70 million endeavor, or you can go to jail for growing your cannabis and selling it because you won't be able to sell it to the stores.
Sure.
Everything from the stores is going to have to come from the licensed producer. So it's kind of like a liquor store having to buy from Pallister or Molson or Budweiser or whoever. It all goes through LBD and it's distributed that way. So please, I'm happy to hear that Trump's actually said something. Trust me, we don't hear this stuff here at all. We don't get these good news, news flashes.
Right. Yeah, no. Again, if Trump were in the White House, I wouldn't be part of a national coalition at all. And I know there's a lot of negative press, obviously, and again, a lot of negative. The globalists seem to be so, and this is one of the things I made note of. Nobody in the media liked Trump at the beginning. I've never seen a year like this last year where 90% of the media was against Trump. And for me, that was kind of a sign that, like, wow, this isn't the same game we've always been playing, where it's half and half, and we keep switching back and forth. The whole globalist corporate autocracy zeroed in on Trump and said, we got to get him out of office. This wasn't supposed to happen. And for me, that's very exciting. I mean, again, I deal with almost anybody in office as long as all the globalists hate him, right? He could say all sorts of crazy slimy, weird things, as long as he's standing up against the globalist. And so we spent the last year trying to make sure that he doesn't make those kind of mistakes. He doesn't have this interest in supporting this actually, because everyone thinks he's this billionaire, so he's part of that group, but he's really not. He's never been to Davos. He never got invited to any of these big events that go on with the globalists. He's a big enough globalist, a big enough billionaire to be able to be at all those events, but he never was. Until he's president, he was never invited to Davos. So he's an outsider. Even as a billionaire, he's an outsider. So we actually have a very unique moment to roll this in a different direction, and we're going to do our very, very best. And again, the coalition's strong, or we're zeroing in on the types of points we're looking for. And if we pass that type of legislation, it will protect us. It'll protect the average grower. Again, if we limit the licensing fees, the Jack Herer model was you can't charge more than $5,000 a year for licensing fees compounded together. Limited taxes, 10%. 10% is fair, right? But not more than that. So those are the kind of things that if we create the right framework, it can't get to us. It was like Prop 215. We created the proper framework, and 20 years later, not that it wasn't perfect, not that people didn't get harassed, not that there weren't a lot of people who went through a lot of drama over the 20 years. But like I said, once you got to an appellate court, we always won. So again, the framework is what's important. It's not that it won't continually be a fight against us, but if we're protected by law, it allows us to move and grow and be part of this industry. And so, fair and equal access, hashtag fair and equal access. Probably find me talking about what we're demanding in legalization. And it's a bold moment. Again, had I not had this group of, again, none of these fat guys see themselves as Republicans. They're all libertarians in the Republican Party, just like many of the Democrats today don't actually want to see themselves as Democrats. They call themselves progressives, right? So it's funny, both parties are filled with people who don't want to be in those parties. But yeah, this group is definitely a unique circle of folks who are tickled by, and I'm reminded that Jack Herer was a Republican, Dennis Peron was a Republican. So the people who've actually crafted good legislation, they've all been Republicans. There's not a Democrat who's crafted a piece of decent legislation in the cannabis movement. And yet nobody in California wants to hear that today because, again, we're all resistors and we're all, strong on the left side or whatever. But the reality is Trump and Roger Stone and this group around him, they understand the Jack Herer initiative better than
Yes. Okay.
Hey, this is Cheech.
And this is Chong.
And you're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
What is it?
Lifestyle Radio. Say it one more time.
420 radio?
Ooh.
Hang up and try again.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
we're back with whatever. And so we were talking about, with your work with Roger. So, and we were saying you never lost so many friends in your whole life. And I understand that because I can't imagine that anybody's pretty, up about you being supportive of Donald Trump, because I know what it's like up here. I mean, we're on the other side of the border, right? So we don't have to deal with, the rhetoric that, and we do see a bit of U.S. news, and we do have U.S. networks up here and stuff. And, it's not like we're living in, well, it is a twilight zone, quite frankly, but because when we hear what goes on down there. But like I said, I know a lot of my friends up here will block people that are supporters of Trump, right? So I kind of get that. So, but like you said, you've made some headway, right? But like I was saying too, like, yeah, please be careful because there's so much that they can take and give and then take, and that's how I feel it's going on up here.
Sure. No, it's I'm willing to, again, it's been such a long haul, and I've really dedicated my life in this direction. So I'm certainly willing to risk it all, as it were, or to put my neck on the line. But yeah, no, we've been physically threatened. I've been physically assaulted. I've been through a lot this last year just trying to legalize cannabis in California. So you find some odd paradoxes here. Oh yeah, no. I've had to take it quite seriously, as is, Roger Stone. He's got a multiple security guards he has to travel with in any of the progressive cities he goes to in America today, and he's had hundreds of death threats, and they kicked him off of Twitter. Roger Stone got sued by the DNC for $100 million 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's been something. Oh yeah, it's been something every week that kind of keeps us from putting the cannabis issue at the forefront. He had to testify to Congress 4 months ago about Russiagate. They're still trying to link Roger Stone and to Trump, to Assange, to Russia. So that's still most of the emphasis, most of this nastiness, although they'll throw dozens and dozens of complaints and accusations and lawsuits at all these folks. So
absolutely,
we hear about that.
We're hearing that up here, right? We're hearing about the Russiagate. We're hearing about the Facebook, breaches and
let me
how
clarify you. Let me clarify, what's going on with Russiagate, because I'm not about to get on the wrong side of a criminal investigation. I'm not linking myself to a group that is, involved in deviant crimes and anti-American activity, and hence the reason I've never supported any of the people in office in the last 30 years of my lifetime. But Russiagate is as bogus as could be. I found forensic evidence about 7, 8, 9 months ago that proved none of these guys could be associated with Russiagate. They keep saying that the Russians and hence Stone and these people involved in that hacked into the DNC computer and took out all the emails that got released before the election. They call them the Podesta emails, the Vault 7, I think, when WikiLeaks released all the stuff with Podesta's emails in it that, created the whole Pizzagate scandal and that whole thing. That was done from the outside, that they somehow, the Russians, with Stone's encouragement, hacked their computers. And yet forensically, it's been proven that those files could not have been hacked from the outside. There's no T1 line. There's no internet line big enough in the world to draw out 33,000 emails in the little bit of time it took to do it. The only way that can happen is if somebody put a flash drive into a computer. You know how you can download things much faster onto your flash drive and then you can send them over the internet? Same thing.
No, I'm not techie.
Literally, the DNC computer could not have been hacked from the outside. A guy named Seth Rich, we all believe, was the guy who stuck the drive in, downloaded all the computers, sent them probably through the mail to somebody who got him to WikiLeaks. And then Seth Rich got shot in the head 2 weeks later. They murdered him in D.C. He's a young guy. He's like 25-year-old DNC employee, right? But they've linked it back to him, so we believe that's what happened. But forensically, we know somebody did a flash drive, that nobody hacked. The Russians could not have hacked the computers from the outside. And yet to this day, 9 months after that being proven, they're still running with the story that DNC and Russians hacked the computers. So I know for a fact that what they're coming after Stone for is not true. And most people who've looked at it closely know. And I don't think they actually even plan on ever trying to prove it in court. I think they're just trying to create the illusion that somehow these people are all traitors and deserve to be thrown in jail or killed or whatever the plan is.
Right.
And and it's faulty. Again, if I believe that these guys were involved in it, I would try to legalize cannabis in a different way. But right now, I believe they're being persecuted unfairly by the media, and that goes along with cannabis movement. We've all been persecuted unfairly by the media. So again, I'm being very careful and thoughtful about where I move and how I do this, and I'm finding myself more and more comfortable working with this group, despite the fact that the media and the naysayers seem to think that they're somehow evil incarnate. I'm not finding that at all. I was a big I used to march in the streets against the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's certainly the worst deal America's ever made. And Trump said somewhere along the way he'd get rid of that. And on day one of his presidency, he got rid of it. And not a word from the progressive movement that also tried very hard to stop the TPP. And that's when I started to realize, oh, this is going to be a strange double standard here. No matter what he does, the progressive tip is not going to ever give him credit. And there's going to be a constant war no matter what he does. So I've had to be alert and aware of that and do my own research to find out what's real and what's really happening. And I haven't found crimes in this last year like I saw in the last 8 years, and the 8 years before that, and 8 years before that with other presidents and other leaders here. So I'm seeing a double standard and a layer of hypocrisy that is shocking. And again, I'm going to stand by this administration until they give me some reason not to. And that's a strange position for me to be in, but as a nonpartisan person, I'm looking at humans, not parties. And Trump was a Democrat longer than he was a Republican, and again, he considers himself to be a libertarian more than a Republican right now. So what's any of it really mean, except what he does? And so far, what he's done hasn't been as horrible. I mean, again, we were supposed to be, by standards a year ago, we're supposed to be at war with Russia, and the economy is supposed to be crashed, and all this horrible stuff's supposed to happen, and none of it's happened. Economy is better than it ever was. Jobs are better than they ever were. Apparently,
is that true though? Is the economy? Yeah, and that is a great thing. The economy, we are here, even up here, the economy is getting better up here. But yeah, the North Korea, South Korea thing, that really is epic. Like, I mean, that's almost like that's epic. Like, totally. I don't think I ever thought we'd ever see the day. And I'd like to think that, I've done a lot of research, and I study history and stuff too. And you go back to the years 1100 when the Chinese people were so, 2 billion people living in communities in China in the year 1100. They were farther ahead with peace and progress than we are today. And that's something that I think people should understand, that we haven't always been at war. You know what I mean? Like there are peaceful places in in Canada. We are very lucky, but I mean up here there's a lot of upheaval and stuff too. I don't think people really get, but the cannabis movement is one of them, and I think that goes with everywhere. But I mean that border. I'm only 20 minutes away from the border, but I can't cross that border. Right? Like I've got a criminal record for pot. So I will never be able to come to the USA. I will never be able to see the beautiful California coast. You know what I mean? So I live vicariously through my friends in the States and people that can travel because I can't. So it's, oppression still to this day, just for cannabis, no matter where we are. Hello? Okay, looks like we might have lost our guest here, so I'm going to have to say goodbye, and I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I'd like to thank my sponsors, who are 12 High Chicks Magazine, Canadian Therapeutic Cannabis Partners Society, the Haley Rose Foundation, and Mom, the Maritimers United for Medical Marijuana. Harvest Fest is coming up July 21st, 22nd, 23rd. And, of course, Kootenai Cannabis Cup, people looking for sponsorship. Cutoff is the 15th of May. That is KootenaiCannabisCup.org, and you can contact me. Y'all have a great week. We'll see you. Talk to you next week. Bye.
So what are you doing? Nothing. Nothing? Why not? Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website. Sounds like a cool website. Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it. You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.